The question being, how can you transmit the knowledge of a dance company to a younger generation?
It's always hard to talk about something that was not done to be talked about, but anyway, we believe that everybody talks about dance, and you need to talk about it if you want to preserve it and to transmit it from friends to friends, from generation to generation. So
there is a necessity that what has been created can then inform back. It needs to be in constant dialogue.
You know, it's just about communicating with audience and bringing people into what we know in ways that we haven't done as much before. We know how to communicate dance knowledge in the studio. We know how to do it on stage. This, we know. So what else is there?
There is the necessity for a group of people to find other ways to transmit what they know through their bodies and through their being together and working together to a younger generation.
What are the parts of the process? How can you differentiate one part from another? What makes evolution, what makes change happen over time? Well, something transforms into something else, but usually there are some preconditions to that transformation.
The necessity to have these different institutions was really to reflect on all the things we developed. So you have something tangible there. What is really the meaning? Is it useful for others or not? In which way? And then for sure it's going to generate new questions. And maybe for it's going back.
For me, it really will be something also to think about with other projects. What I find very productive about this model is that it allows for these different temporalities, but also for different aims within one project. And I think many projects, especially when trying to combine different types of research within one project, they suffer from the automatic assumption that you have to, in the end, your object has to be the same or the aim has to be the same, which it often isn't.
We are standing on the shoulders of generations and legacies, and as we are standing on the shoulders, we are also looking ahead.
Because everything has been necessary to understand the next step. So even if things were not understood or things were not fully matching, I think the need of having different disciplines, different groups with questions, have made, from my perspective, very positive and functional way of working.
Every research group has had to determine for themselves what their questions were somehow, guided and framed by the fundamental concerns of the project, which are documentation, transmission, and preservation of contemporary dance.
Is that all of us are working on questions about how you transmit dancing ideas, in our case choreographic ideas, and what role technology and digital media have in thinking about new ways of sharing what it is we know and thinking about dance as a site of knowledge for other fields.
I think it's really trying to find out more about your own practice and renegotiating your position in your practice as a whole in a larger context, but also on the conceptual idea of your practice, and revisioning and re-asking yourself, what am I doing?
One of the more specific things in this project with this research lab is that it's so condensed. It's really 2 weeks a year. Each half year we have a week of lab and all of us work together. But of course it's very exhausting, very inspiring at the same time.
Part of the fun is, of course, that there's a lot of respect, and I think personally people get along really well.
In any field of study, if you try to start organizing the knowledge and look for the organization of the concepts and then define the terms and come to hierarchies and creating the final net, in a way, the ontology of this specific field of domain of knowledge, you always get the problems of deciding and observing, being sure of what are the higher concepts, what is then depending, what are actually the narrowest terms, the points of the ends of the branches of a tree.
It's a group of excellence, not only knowledge-wise but also personal-wise, and it's a very good match, and it's very inspiring for, at least for my group, but I have the impression for all of us.
We can see that installation as an exposure of a certain way of thinking or teaching or practicing. And it can change its shape. Even for me as a designer, where I have to envision a certain design for it, I think the process is more interesting than the product.
I really enjoy being a part of the IMK network because I can see how it takes that object and then brings a community together around seeing what that object does. Does it transmit knowledge the way we hope it would? How does it function in the educational setting? How does it allow for different kinds of theorizing?
You know, because it's interdisciplinary, a lot of people are working on it, and but it's raised so many issues already and articulated so many questions.
So very much the why question in a way, and trying to extrapolate that out of all kinds of different sorts of information.
And what can these kind of dance projects tell us about questions of archiving or use of media in education, interactivity and education, questions of trying, does it mean to archive transitory phenomenon like dance or performance?
But it definitely inspired us to think of media tools in education as one more extra medium to enhance knowledge.
And it's also something that is very interesting about the format of this project. It has kind of set out a whole terrain from which things may develop that do not necessarily have to include all the partners in a similar constellation as they have been working now.
So we're also talking about what are the things we can still do in the scope of the project, and how can we, the developed methods, models, and so on, and relation and research group.
And here there's so much productivity, because it's more about local links and moments where you find one another at very different places and times and different people, and this produces an enormous amount of results, which I think is really wonderful.